The UN, the African Union and the West African bloc, Ecowas, have urged the opposition in Ivory Coast to respect constitutional order after they rejected President Alassane Ouattara's election and vowed to set up a transitional government. A joint statement has called on all parties to exercise dialogue and restraint. News correspondent Leanne De Bassompierre is in Abidjan in Côte d'Ivoire, and she joins us now via Zoom for a little bit more on this. Leanne, thanks very much indeed for joining us. Is the situation escalating? What is the state of affairs?
Well, it seems like today was a lot better in the economic capital, Abidjan, at least. We saw people starting to get out more. It was quite dead in the last few days, but it seemed like normal traffic was around. People were starting their little commerce again on the street corners of the economic capital, Abidjan. So it seems like people are slowly feeling less fearful and getting out there again. But as far as the situation with this political standard goes, the government is very clear that what the opposition is doing is illegal. They have been very clear in saying that they are being investigated. For the moment, there's only been people placed under house arrest, according to them. The opposition party sources say that several of the people have been arrested and taken to places that they are not even sure where they are. So there remains a little bit of confusion around this. The ruling RHDP had a press briefing late this afternoon saying that, okay, they did that because it was illegal what they were about to do. They were going to be announcing a parallel government and ministers that they were going to be appointing that would be running parallel to the current government that will be installed once President Alassane Ouattara is inaugurated on the second Monday of December. They said that they've been able to avoid mass violence by being able to do that. They said that the reason why they've been circling Henry Konombede's house and other opposition leaders was to make sure that once that opposition decided to name a transitional government themselves, which would be illegal, thousands of of Democracy and Peace Party supporters will descend on Bedie's house and basically, things could turn into chaos then. So they're saying that by arresting some of these opposition leaders or putting them under house arrest is kind of preventative in what they're doing.
All right. Does this suggest that perhaps the authorities have managed to nip any kind of escalation in the bud, and that this has probably cut off a bit of oxygen to the protests that might have escalated?
Well, they certainly seem to be trying to do that, but they did say in this media briefing late today that the interior of the country still worries them. We've seen in the past few days the convoys of at least 4 government ministers have been attacked. Those cases are being investigated as well. So there is some concern that remains there, but it seems at the source where political party leaders are based in the economic capital, Abidjan, it seems like they are trying to find some kind of political resolution and if need be, some kind of judicial resolution as well. They've insisted that they've been trying to have a dialogue with the opposition as recommended, as you know, by Ecowas, by other international organizations as well. But they said that before the election, the opposition was not prepared to dialogue with the ruling party or with Outtara himself, as he made himself available, because they had wanted to have an independent international mediator doing that, and there was just not the time or the case for that to happen. So it's still something that is on the cards, whether the opposition will want to do that, whether they feel that they can now do that with President Ouattara remains to be seen. But in any case, the RHDP said that they are willing, President Alassane Ouattara is willing to have some kind of dialogue. It's just for the opposition to now say what it is and when it is they are willing to speak.
The opposition, though, must be finding it difficult with so many international bodies, right down from the UN, AU to Ecowas, pretty much endorsing this election that took place this last weekend.
Well, I mean, they had been hoping, I think, for more international support for their cause. but there hasn't really been that much of an update, neither internationally or local support. They've been calling on the supporters to descend on Bedouin's house to come and show support for him, to show support for this transitional government. There seems to be okay support online and on social media, but as you know, social media and reality are not always in sync. So it is quite an interesting kind of parallel to make. But they are certainly trying. They've asked the supporters, at least in the rest of the country, to go out in their numbers to continue with their civil disobedience campaign. But of course, the longer this continues, the longer the government risks destabilizing the country. But for the moment, they seem to be at the start of getting a handle on things and bringing some kind of stability back to Cote d'Ivoire.
So was it too much of a gamble then for these two major players to boycott the election?
Well, the ruling party keeps saying, well, if they did want to govern, why did they not just go to the elections? Why did they ask the supporters to boycott the election? So that remains a contentious issue. Whether they have a strategy in place is also very unclear, because it seems from their daily press conferences that they have, that it is the strategy is kind of very reactive to what happens on a daily basis in the country. It doesn't seem to be a strategy that they are thinking about long term. This transitional government has not really taken off. There doesn't seem to be large support for them, or as much support as what they had hoped that they would get for this. Also with different international bodies, saying that you need to maintain the rule of law, that you need to abide by the Constitution, and this, of course, not being the way to go about seeking a resolution for peace. I mean, it was 10 years ago that this country lost at least 3,000 people when former President Laurent Gbagbo refused to concede defeat to Outtara. That ended in 5 months of post-electoral violence. Speaking to ordinary people on the streets of Abidjan, nobody wants to return to that kind of violence that was seen in the country previously. There are no signs that it will, but things still remain tense in anticipation of what could happen as people remember what has happened in the past.
All right, so Abidjan, the commercial capital, always seems to be a focal point of some of these issues. What has been the mood across the country generally?
Well, we saw in the city of Gabon, which is about 60 kilometers away from Abidjan, there were more than a dozen people killed within 2 days. Things seem to have quietened a bit there. In cocoa-growing communities, we've spoken to exporters who say that they've been very scared to load trucks with cocoa in fear that they would be burned or would be robbed or be caught in the mayhem of the past few days. Arrivals to the port, not as many exported cocoa to the port to be able to be shipped out from the country, not arriving in the last few days. People are nervous and anxious about what could happen. But that could change once things stabilize in the country. We also saw in the capital, Yamoussoukro, that saw quite a bit of violence over the weekend. There was a curfew that was installed there. That seems to be lifted. There were also some issues of fuel shortages as the Total distribution center was forced to close there. It seems, though, that now things are slowly returning to normal. As I said, it still remains an issue. The government still remains worried about what's happening in the interior of the country. But I think that they seem to be starting with Abidjan and working their way from there to try to bring some sense of normality again.
All right, and just before the election, we saw former President Laurent Gbagbo make an appearance on Belgian television. Has he said anything post the election?
He's very quiet, just as quiet as what he was for 9 years before breaking his silence last Thursday. His wife, Simone Gbagbo, the former First Lady, has been quite active. She was the first one in fact to call for this transitional government. Some analysts are saying that perhaps Gbagbo even could be the one to come in and dialogue or to be the person that is the mediator for dialogue between the opposition and the current administration. Of course, he's still awaiting the outcome of the prosecutor's appeal of his acquittal last January. So that still remains until when he will be back in the country. Even in his speech that he gave, or his interview that he gave on Thursday evening with TV Sankmo, he didn't call for mass protests, he didn't call for people to go out and support and go onto the streets. So I think if that was the opposition's aim to kind of use him as a trump card to get more support ahead of the vote, it didn't really work as such. But as I said, he's been quiet. He hasn't said anything since the vote has taken place. We do know that some negotiations had taken place before the announcement of this, the first announcement of this transitional government. He was included in those talks, but the outcome of which has not been made public.
All right. Leanne De Bassompierre, always great talking to you. Thanks so much indeed for that update. That's news correspondent Leanne De Bassompierre reporting from Abidjan.